Welcome to Suffolk Matters, where all of Suffolk County meets the men and women of Suffolk AME. News, opinions, and insights you won't hear anywhere else. Here's your host, the president of New York's largest independent union, Suffolk AME's Dan Leveler.
Welcome to another edition of Suffolk Matters on Walk 97.5 and 94.3 The Shark, where Suffolk County meets the men and women of Suffolk AME. News and views you can't hear anywhere else. All right, so my guest this morning is Steve Flotteron. He's the Deputy Presiding Officer of the Suffolk County Legislature. So good morning, Steve. Thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, happy to have you, so you have your role, Deputy Presiding Officer. You're also the representative for the 11th, Suffolk County's 11th Legislative District. And before we get into what does it mean to be, a legislator representing your district, or what it means to be a Deputy Presiding Officer on the legislature, and what that specifically might look like, tell us a little bit about your history. I mean, you've been around government for a while. Let's start from day one.
My quick history, I was born and grew up in Limerick, New York. I slowly, after college, one of my college friends lived out in the Bayshore area. I moved out to Bayshore. And as anyone knows, Bayshore was going through some of its struggles in the 80s and 90s and stuff. And I was in insurance. I was an insurance agent, stockbroker. And I got civically active right away, trying to help improve the new community I moved into because, part of it was beautiful. I live in Brightwood, and part of it has some issues.
Sure.
And I civically got involved. I went to a community meeting. It's like any community meeting. You ask a question, next thing you know, you're chair of a committee.
Right. Yes.
I'm like 33 years old or whatever, 34. And I got civically active and had some successes, a bunch of successes, from changing town nuisance law to county nuisance law, going to Albany and changing the District Court Act. And I didn't even know what truthfully half these terms meant.
Sure.
But it's like just when we put complaints in about issues like a house that has 30 cars across the front lawn.
Right.
And you find out, there's these different roadblocks. I'm like, well, how do you change it? And most people laugh, well, you can't because that's Albany or that's the county. I guess I was their worst nightmare. I was a life insurance salesman. I wouldn't leave until it changed. So got this signature and we got some things changed, and I got asked to run. And then I was in the ISO town board for 12 years, and a lot of great experiences.
Sure.
And I sort of called my change of life to a career is doing a lot less insurance and being full-time, really working in the community, and I love it.
Sure. Yeah. And listen, as a guy who's been told no on lots of things before and saying, well, I'm not accepting no, and we're going to find a way to yes, I got to commend you for your effort. It's sometimes lost on people how much altruism goes into jobs like this. We say this about our members all the time. By their very nature, they could have pursued the same career path in other locations and maybe financially have done a little bit better on the front end. And we find that, with civil servants, they have a tendency to want to help more so than anything else. And it's not lost on me that the same goes for people who put themselves out there to, run a campaign and get elected to office in an attempt to change things for the better. Yeah.
No, exactly. I jokingly say, it's messed up my income, but it's like I'm happier. It's like, I feed off like a lot of people, like our workers. It's really helping people. It's in our blood.
Sure. And listen, you were known back in the town level, you were known, or rather the village of Brightwaters, you were known as a guy that really dug into the numbers. You weren't going to receive a report, glance at the first page, and then try and make decisions based on that. You did the deep dive, and you were known for staying late in the office and running those numbers. Like you say, as an insurance guy, you say, okay, I have numbers. I know what to do with them. Let's find out if the piece of paper in front of me is factual and what can we do.
Yeah. It gets to the bottom line. It's New York and Long Island. It's one of the most expensive places you can live. And, one is why are most of us here? It's because besides it being our home, we love the beaches, love to be near the city. And if we weren't into either of those two things, yes, maybe you can move somewhere else, but I can't. I wouldn't. I love the New England feel of Suffolk County, but it gets expensive, and people. I'm now 61, and I start seeing some of my neighbors whose kids are out of high school and out of college, and they're going, "Hey, the amount of taxes I pay for real estate plus the state income tax." They want to move to the Carolinas and Florida. Not that they want to; they're being forced to because they will have $2,000 more a month in their wallet.
Right.
How are we going to retain people or retain all the things we love here if we're being forced out here economically? So, got to ask those questions and see where there's waste, how you could do things a little cheaper. And a lot of times, I found, even when I was in the town of Ice, I had the opportunity. I claim I got to do over $3 million of capital improvements of town parks and facilities by reaching out and meeting different groups, even groups like yours.
Sure.
A lot of people want to give back and help the community.
Right.
You just got to set them off the platform.
Yeah.
And I did cleanup days, and I ended up having contractors donating shrubbery or labor. Right. I had one event where Lowe's came marching in from 4 stores with tractor trailer full of bushes and shrubs and 40 employees, besides the local people, neighbors that came down to try to help rebuild, working with our employees, because ends up a lot of times we're just cutting employees to try to so-called cut our budgets.
Right.
But a lot of times then we have to hire outsiders, which outside people that end up costing a lot more. And
Tons more.
And I see that in our own county budget, well, like things like our engineers.
This is something that you and I have been talking about for quite some time, and just to dive in from my perspective, it's always disheartening to see that you have licensed engineers, folks that are hired and work for the county that have the necessary licenses to do design work on something as simple as a 6-foot fence, a normal fence, chain link fence, nothing special. And we go to outside agencies, $500,000, $1 million to design something that somebody on the payroll right now for $80,000, $90,000 a year could do in-house. I'm not suggesting that we can't and that there's no place for outside agencies to help in government. But step one shouldn't be to give the lion's share of the money to outside agencies to design something that your internal staff can design. Maybe the design happens in-house and the external agencies can just double check and give their 2 cents and save the taxpayers money and still end up with the same or better product.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And that's where, again, the numbers, and because a lot of people, I'll be blunt, they look at a person, politically, I'm Republican conservative, but I'm conservative about numbers.
Right.
And the numbers are, and a lot of times they'll think, hey, they might be anti-worker or government. It's like totally wrong, because I see the numbers. It'd be cheaper to have our own employees that are there because we're hiring. I had one meeting alone where we floated, I think it was like almost $2 million worth of bonding for engineers. And we could have hired 2 engineers, like for $100-something thousand each. Could have done all the work. And so you end up having administration now, or prior administrations, where they maybe, we're conservatives. We got rid of 100 employees. Yeah, because you're hiring outside contracts. And you go,
way more.
Why, are they that dumb? Like, no, they're doing it purposely because they get more campaign checks or kickbacks from these engineering firms than they would ever get from an employee. And that's really the whole thing. They get to win both ways politically, but it destroys our tax base, our community, and everything else.
Yeah, and there's a flip side to that argument also. They like to say, well, if I hire someone today, then I've got them for 30 years, So if I just hire this outside agency, I use them for this project and I go on. But what you paid them pays for 10 years of their service. And in the next 9 years, there's going to be 10, 15, 20, 30 other projects they could work on. The savings actually builds up. Public employees in general actually save the county more money than these outside firms ever will, because they're not there for profit in a way a business is.
And I did with the town of Iceland budget, and I have been also working with you. It's just like one time we had to get certain services done. Let's face it, we pay really high taxes in our county and town, or state roads and everything else. Things look sloppy here. How many times we go away to other states and everything looks pristine,
so
maintained, and we're not. And it's not that. We just have less employees per capita than other areas. And I did that research too.
Sure.
But there's ways that we could save money and be able, that money we save, or raise revenue from different things we do, and we could hire more employees to do it. It doesn't have to cost more. And again, engineering alone, when I said one meeting alone, it was close to $2 million. Is the type jobs are like, here's $200,000 to hire an engineer to redesign a little intersection. It's moving a couple of curbs. Mm-hmm. It's probably an engineer. It's probably a month's worth of work, and we're spending $200,000. I could have him again hire someone, and this guy could do 12 projects.
Sure.
He could have done probably everything, one or two people. And we should really just be hiring out for specialty work. We're not going to be a jack of all trades, but simple intersections, curbs. We have our own roads. We're doing them every month. We have bridges and overpasses. We should have a basic person. Sure. We might have them, but we don't have enough.
You're correct. And I entirely agree with that concept. We do not have enough. And listen, you have draftsmen. They're on the payroll. They can handle, the plans. You have surveyors. They can go out, take all the measurements the engineer's going to need to do the design work. I mean, everything is there inside of government to do the job right, we just spend a fortune on outside agencies. Now, I'm not suggesting that the county needs to hire 10 hazard divers to, swim around the bay all the time for a project that maybe lasts 6 months, right?
Agreed.
That's a specialty type of job where you're going to maybe do some outside hiring. But general engineering work, the county is constantly doing this. It's sometimes lost on people. The economy and the population in Suffolk County is larger than some states. And when you look at those states and the amount of employees they have to maintain their roadways and everything else that they do, all the government services that they provide, they have a ton more employees than Suffolk County does.
Yeah.
Sometimes not spending the money on a couple of employees actually costs the county more money.
Yeah. Because we're working on triage in a way of how we manage our infrastructure. And you can take a really close look at a lot of our parks and our historic sites that we maybe own. Again, is doing that, and also is maybe doing more contracts with businesses, so maybe there's partnerships and working together and doing those things, bringing some revenue too.
Yeah, and listen, I'm not a fan of, and I'm not going to put words in anybody's mouth, but I'm not a fan of the concept of austerity, right? When you say, okay, well, things are tough right now, so we're going to stop cutting the grass, we're going to stop doing this, we're going to, reduce the workforce and whatever else. You create these bottlenecks, you create these expenses. And something as simple as groundskeeping, right? The grass in front of the building at the legislature. Or
First
any
impressions.
That's it. So now you're a taxpayer, and you're paying all this money, and we've talked about how expensive it is to live here and to get by here, and you have need of your government, and you go see your government, who you gave more money than you cared to handle your needs, the government's responsibilities, and the first thing you see is they can't even handle cutting grass. And yes, we can. Of course we can. We've decided to cut back on those functions. So not only does that impact the morale of the workers who do that work, and they feel like things look bad, and every time they've got to step in and fix something, it's a major project instead of a simple maintenance thing. It affects the morale of the workers that are working at those locations. And then the taxpayers come in and they say, listen, you guys can't handle grass. How can I trust you with all the rest of my money? How do I know that all the other services that you're providing is top notch? And we know they are. But even something as simple as cutting the grass, it has an impact.
Well, first impressions also, just like someone, a lot of times people are corporately moving to the area, and it ends up, you're not going to want to live in an area that looks disheveled. It's hurting our own real estate price and everything else when you have the sides of the highways and our parks and everything that aren't looking top notch, because we're in competition, say, to Nassau County, we're in competition to Westchester.
Sure.
If somebody gets a job in this tri-state area, which is going to be the more beautiful county or town with all the amenities. And even going a tiny bit back, about the engineering. Again, why it's happening, like in some of these positions, like a high-priced one like that, it's more at the end of the year, you could say, we shrank government. And then in the long run, it's also, when you have employees, we're doing pay-as-you-go.
Right. They
shrink government. They say, we don't need to raise taxes, or I'm not saying they ever want to.
Right.
But they do because they're bonding it out.
Right.
All these projects, they're borrowing money, they're putting it on the credit card, and it's going to be loaned out for 30 years, and that's only going to mount with interest and growing.
With interest,
and it's basically, we're going to have a mess 10 years from now.
Right.
Proud to say, in the last, I've been bringing a lot of these things up in the meetings, but my background on the investments is one of the most important things is bond rating. Town of Ice, when I left, it had a AAA bond rating, the highest you could have.
Right.
And what that means, if anybody doesn't understand that, it's like having a perfect credit score. You'll be able to remortgage your house for the cheapest price possible, which saves everybody money. When I got in Suffolk County, they had the lowest bond rating in New York State. You're just talking about 61 other counties have better bond rate, better managed.
Right.
And what that means to people, it costs us more money to borrow than anywhere else. And we're one of the richest counties in the country. Yeah. And places like Erie, New York, if Grandma wanted to buy a long-term bond, it's better to buy that county than our county.
Right.
And we're the more supposedly wealthier county. Since we've got on the Budget and Finance Committee in the majority, I'm proud to say we just got our second bond rating. It's going to take a little time, increase, and we have to bring that up because that will save us more money. So one is we can't keep on bonding out,
right?
And we got to pay as we go,
right?
And we have to make sure there's a little in reserves. And how do we do things more efficiently? And I'm proud to say, part of many personalities pushing it the other way, and I'm glad to be on the budget.
Yeah,
Finance
and
committee.
again, that's a lot of what we have been talking about, you and I, with regards to how can the county do a better job for the taxpayers, right? And my members want to do a better job for the taxpayers, but they need the resources to do so. And we get them those resources, it actually saves the county money over time, rather than bonding things out, paying these inflated interest rates over decades of time. But you mentioned the budget. Lot to unpack there, the Suffolk County budget. But one thing I want to thank yourself and the various folks that voted this budget through in the 22 operating budget. There was a little carve out in there, so $3+ billion budget, and a little chunk of that was carved out and put in reserve for AME to sit down and negotiate with the county to get certain positions filled where they weren't being competitive at all.
Yes.
Where it was impossible. Even if they would open up 10 job opportunities for a particular title, 0 people would take the job.
Yes.
And that's problematic for the county. So we had to get competitive on rates and make some adjustments. And that carve-out was very helpful to us to be able to sit down and say there actually is a reserve of funds here, and we'll be able to fix these problems. What we found was there were a lot of other places where the same issues were occurring where I actually don't want to blame any administration, not on the union side, not on the management side. This is something that compounded over decades. And as time went on, people in higher paying jobs, higher earning jobs, when they got an increase of, say, 2 or 3%, they moved a lot more than the people who were earning less. And over time, these essential but entry-level positions became so uncompetitive that, the people who would say yes, you couldn't hire. And the people you wanted to hire couldn't say yes. Some of these jobs, folks had to sign on to say, okay, I'll take this job with the county, but I'm also going to have to get another job, otherwise I can't keep my lights on. And in the 23 operating budget, you guys, not only were we able to carve out a little bit of money like we did the year before, but we actually tripled it in size, almost 4 times the size, to go back in and address these issues. And I gotta say, I appreciate the leadership that you've shown there, recognizing how this works and why this works, and allowing us to advocate for our members.
If a conservative person maybe listening right now would be like, oh, so you're spending more money? It's like, no, what ended up happening, may explain a little bit more, we had much higher paid employees that are there in other positions, how to get double time to cover these other positions.
Right.
So in the long run, we're going to save taxpayers a lot of money by increasing the entry level just a little bit, because we're getting killed on all this overtime. So in the long run, we're going to save you tax money by making sure there was enough money to pay the entry levels, hopefully. So,
right. Yeah. No. And listen, an easy example for me to put out there is crossing guards. Right.
Okay.
So if a crossing guard wasn't on the post because there was no one to fill that position, it had to be filled by a police officer, generally on overtime. And the cost of a crossing guard, the crossing guard provides that function only. A police officer does many, many things, trained for many, many things, and therefore is compensated for all those different responsibilities that they have. But if they're sitting there on overtime crossing kids versus a crossing guard crossing kids, the difference in cost was more than 10 times.
Yes.
And there were points in time when we started working on this problem where you'd have 23 police cars out on patrol, but 21 of them were on crossing guard posts.
Yes. Exactly.
Two cops to police an area. That's not good for public safety. They need to be out and doing the job that they need to be doing, and we had to adjust crossing guard rates. And so we sat down, we figured out how we could, and we did.
I was just telling you maybe even a little bigger picture for the listeners. Every month, or every 3 weeks, the county legislature has their meetings. We have like 100 different things we vote on.
Sure.
And prior to that, we, just for the listeners to understand, we break it apart into committees. Like, hey, this topic's DPW, this topic's parks, this one's budget and finance. So besides being the chair of the Budget and Finance Committee, I'm also the chair of Public Safety, which is the police department. And to maybe explain, I started learning the problem, like, say, I'll say one school district in Brentwood. I hear sometimes at 3 o'clock, there's about 8 sectors cars could be pulled from, doing all the stuff. When you worry about calling 911.
Prime time for accidents.
Going to a car accident or a robbery or any other issue, a traffic light that's out on the intersection. No, we don't have enough cross guards, and they're being pulled to cross the kids at 3 o'clock. And again, police officers, especially a seasoned one, is doing well, and then they're now maybe past their shift and everything else. And then are they time and a half or double time? Because we need to have crossing guards there. So it got to, hey, can we come up with another $2 an hour for, this entry-level job of being a crossing guard to entice them to want to join, so we don't have to have someone that's like 20 times that type of income doing this job, and for public safety. So it's the crossing guard situation is a public safety. I'm talking about regular policing is being pulled away right now to cover this. And there's a lot of this, I choose words like stupidity happening, and working with you, Dan. I found out where the problem was, and I understand now. Well, say the bureaucracy, the legal things, the contracts, and it ends up made. Listen, I understand. It's like, oh, why don't you just fix it? Well, that's how I felt too, and I think I aggravate every. It comes so it opens up a myriad of other things contract-wise. It could have other issues, and is it the best time to fix it? This is one problem of a large amount of employees. They could open a Pandora box of contracts, which cause other issues. So that's what takes That's why it takes more than an hour to decide. The person being from private practice, I don't understand that at first, but I understand it, more now. And it had to, one was let's make sure we have funding in the budget, because there's legal ways how we bring money there. And again, part of learning, not being in government originally, how do we do it? But only advantage of that sometimes could be a little naive on how it works, because I could be a little bit more of a.
You can ask the common sense question,
and I can be a little
procedural one.
And I can still have my aggravatedness and be pushy about it. And we can sort of make sure we get to the right spot a little quicker.
Yeah. And listen, it's always tricky in a position like mine, where I know that something like this is happening, when we talk specifically about crossing guards and we need to get this issue fixed. And knowing that there are a number of other issues out there that still need to be addressed, and knowing that I'm going to walk back and tell my membership, hey, we fixed this thing with the crossing guard, it will immediately trigger everyone else. It's like, where are we at on my issue? And sometimes we have the opportunity to then go in and work on those things, and sometimes we have to pull back a little bit because of all the complicated bureaucracy that goes into these things. But long story short, when we were able to finally sit down, reason all these things through, figure out how we were going to fix the crossing guards issue, and then we went ourselves and we went on a campaign and kind of pushed out into the world, this is what it means to be a crossing guard. This is the type of person that belongs in the crossing guard position, the whole nine. And we went from having almost no applicants to having over 3,000 applicants for this job.
Oh, really? Terrific.
So there are so many people waiting to, and then, the funny thing there is there's certain background checks that have to happen. There's all these different things in order to legally be able to get the job. And so it still took time. Having thousands of applicants. And let's, just picture yourself as someone saying, okay, I would love this job. Let me jump in. And then 6 months later wondering, what's happening? Where's my phone call? Am I in? Am I out? What's going on?
And I heard you worked on speeding that up, working with the different unions. I mean, which is terrific.
The crossing guards go through a more rigorous screening than teachers do, and teachers are in the classroom with the kids all day long, and crossing guards have to jump through more hoops, than, just to be able to stand outside in the rain and make sure your kid gets across the street.
That's what happens when the government gets involved.
Yes. So, just a little bit more on the budget. I know there was a lot of great things and stuff that I wanted to talk about specifically, but was there something in this 23 operating budget you're particularly proud of?
I'm proud of, we got everyone to, basically just about everyone to agree and vote on the budget. We got more in reserves. Hey, I mean, because it's not just any person's magic. Thank God, truthfully, the stimulus and everything helped us out.
Sure.
But myself and my colleagues were asking the right questions, like, hey, should we pay this down or do we put in reserves? Which helps more about what does Standard & Poor's and these other groups do for bond rating. It's more like, what do they want to see also besides doing the proper things?
Sure.
But sometimes, just like your own credit rating, you think, let's pay off this credit card and get rid of it. Sometimes that messes up your credit rating.
Right.
So how do we do it right, asking those right questions? And again, we're not on the edge of being junk bonds anymore, and that's where we were. And so we're getting it out of with the letter B and into the A's rating. So glad to see that, and we'll keep on asking the tough questions until we get there.
Sure. And everybody knows on a personal level when they're working on their own finances, you've got to do certain things to get that credit rating up. And getting the credit rating up means that you can borrow at a lower rate. And then hopefully you get to the point where you're operating all on money you have and not money that you're borrowing.
Exactly.
But these are the steps that need to be taken to get there. And, obviously Suffolk County government wants to be in a position. It's in the best interest of the taxpayer and the government itself to get to a position where we're solvent. We're not having, these structural debt issues and this debt service going forward.
Well, one thing we even voted on yesterday, when I first got here 5 years ago, we'd be voting every couple of months on bonding of like $100 million just to have it as a slush fund for anticipated taxes in the future.
Right.
That would be like, again, people do, on your paycheck, like, oh, let me get a loan for my May's pay so I can cover the bills today in February.
Right.
And that's what we were doing. We don't have to do that anymore. We did a resolution the other day we passed where, just giving the control the opportunity, because we have different pots and there's different legalities how you go. Just like you might have in your home a couple different checking account and a bank account. Like,
right.
I have to run to the bank and move some out of the checking and put it in the savings or vice versa. Mm-hmm. We're able to do that now, and we just gave, say, the control, the power to do that instead of having to float $100 million of credit, which we've done. They call them rands and tans and all these other, in other words.
Right.
And we didn't have to do that because we have enough in our different accounts to move it around.
Right.
Which, again, how many millions were we paying just on interest to float something for a couple of months?
That's exactly the problem, right?
And in the long run, we could hire the crossing guards and with less overtime. And it's this whole dominoes of things, how we could control the taxes.
Of course. Yeah. And, again, I said it before, but I want to reiterate my appreciation for your availability so we could sit and talk about, at least from our perspective, what we saw as, questions that should be on your mind, questions that are certainly on our mind and our members' minds, and what's overall best for the government, right?
Yeah,
and just having the availability to sit down and talk these things through, been invaluable for us and our members. Hopefully, the legislature got some good feedback from us in the process, and just thanks again.
Well, thank you. And part of this job too is you learn, maybe it's by other background being investments and sales. It's where's the roadblock? What's stopping that? And maybe I look at my job as an elected, is how do I sort of force or aggravate to get past that with the different personalities or laws or whatever it might be who I have to contact, so it's not sitting on, say, someone's desk and it doesn't get resolved.
Right.
Doesn't mean you say. The county exactly wasn't trying, but there's somewhere as an outsider, how do I push this to happen so we can get past any nonsense?
Yes. Yes. Always the frustration in government,
yeah.
Right? So, at the beginning of the show, we talked a little bit about altruism, how public employees generally have that altruistic nature. And, we made the distinction about how, elected officials, people that go out and walk around and speak to thousands of people and say, please vote for me because I want to fight for you. I want to be in your corner. I want to, bring your perspective to the forefront and get things done for you. There's an altruism in that as well.
Yes.
And that, that in mind, AME does every year. We have a Veterans Appreciation Dinner. So Suffolk AME hosts, and this year we were looking for a veteran to, bring forward, and you had made the recommendation of bringing forward Matt Simone. And I want to thank you. Matt is the founder of Bravo Foxtrot.
Yes.
That's an organization. So on top of everything else that you're doing and staying up late and running numbers and everything else, you get involved in organizations.
I was at his
like
office
this.
11 p.m. last night.
I believe it. And you listen, a great guy. That's another guy. This is why we find these kinships in the jobs that we do. We may not agree on every single issue, but at least you're dealing with people who are advocating as much as they possibly can on behalf of the people they represent. So why don't you let us know a little bit about Bravo Foxtrot, how you got involved with them, and
how I got involved is maybe stepping back. In every community we see right now in our economy and what's happening in the country, there's people complaining about homeless problems, vagrancy, and this and that. And I was at a Bay Shore Chamber of Commerce meeting, just like any other chamber, saying, why isn't more here? Why aren't you doing things about this and that?
Right.
And all of a sudden during the meeting when people were, complaining about it, because we see the rise throughout the country, and, sometimes it makes you feel uncomfortable. And, hey, when you park your car, someone panhandling your ball, you feel safety you get worried about.
Right.
This young man stands up with a lot of charisma, and it was Matt, and he says, hey, I'm the face of homeless. I was homeless.
Right.
And I learned more about him. And he was Navy Special Operations, to my understanding. He was in the Navy for 10 years. And he had to probably see and do a lot of things that we could not even imagine.
Of course.
And he came back, and it's getting reintegrated back. Imagine you're basically taught as a young man, 18, 19, to be a killing machine.
Right.
and they come back and like, oh, let's go to a 2-year-old birthday party.
Now hold,
it's
right,
like
hold the door for somebody and say please and thank you.
A balloon pops, and
disparity.
you're about to go out the wall.
Uh-huh.
And so he was going through his major struggles. He lost his wife, his children, his family, and everything else. And slowly he became homeless. He was living in a dumpster, and he introduced himself this way in front of the meeting.
Right.
And he pointed out he just started a not-for-profit. It's been part of his healing and therapy. He's helping others.
Right.
He was doing it all off his own disability check. His 100%, service-related disabled.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And he was doing it to make himself feel better, just like people that maybe join Al-Anon or something else.
Right.
They support of each other. They understand each other. And I started helping him really more access. He'd call me and say, hey, wait, can I help you? At first I was a little leery. I don't know who he is or what. You meet a lot of people, and he's dealing with a difficult crowd. And I'm proud to say, and I even got from your event the other night, I realized one of your guests there, one of your attorneys, who was representing a lot of your members, I got a little update too, because I like to verify things.
Sure.
In the past year, that law firm alone has gotten over 30 veterans that were Matt brought to them.
Right.
And I'm talking about the ones Matt's mostly dealing with. It's really where a lot of our non-for-profits have problems reaching. It's some of the ones living in the woods, some of them in 30 years.
Yes.
I'm talking about Project Desert Storm and everything else.
Right.
Matt has a special talent of talking to ones that no one's been able to reach. Almost every side thought is throwaway, and he's got them brought them to legal help. He's got them supplies to survive. Right. Got them slowly into emergency housing, and he was doing it all by himself. He's doing it through himself and his wonderful wife. And it's part of his therapy each night. He's going to woods, saving others to keep himself sane. And you gotta have critics. He's rough around the edges. He sometimes agitates people, and people start saying, you find some of these not-for-profits, they're all little competition.
Of course.
So but he's again, I was able to even clarify with an attorney like how many people, he's just in the past
and that
year.
Was just one attorney. That's
just one. He's
firm,
working with other places like Toro and everything else. And that's just one person, but someone we both know maybe personally, legitimately respected. Who's saying like, no, we've been helping a lot of these people. And some of these cases are open to take a while and everything else. And he's given his life to help others to make sure he keeps his own life.
Great guy. Sat and spoke with him. Got to understand his direction and his mission. And I got to tell you, that guy's on it. Yeah. So if you know someone that needs help, bravofoxtrot.org. See if you can get in touch and make that connection and get things going.
Or feel free to reach out to even my office too, and I can try to help you connect. We have sometimes Boy Scouts collecting things like supplies for them. There's all different things. That goes back to what I originally said. We could get a lot of things done in our society, and a lot of times government or electeds don't know how to ask the private industries or unions and everything else. Everyone wants to do something, we just got to give them the venue. And that's why I find maybe my job, or maybe everybody has certain expertise in life, what they're good at. Like you're great being a union leader, part of a large group of people. My knack maybe is networking and trying to find out what you like, have interests, sort of how you met Matt and how Matt met you, which was helpful for each other. What is your interest? And I try to match those. It's a facilitator. Win-win-win situations, I believe, all the time.
Well, that's and again, an excellent example of the altruism I was talking about. And so we're out of time this morning, but I want to thank our guest this morning, Steve Flotteron. He's the Deputy Presiding Officer and a legislator from the 11th Legislative District in Suffolk County. Steve, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you for this opportunity. I love it.
And to our listeners, we'll speak to you next week.